I quite frankly saw a lot of that harsh language in his first term, and you still get from time now is actually a bit of tough love to try to get the alliance to where it needs to be. And quite frankly, it's been effective. And there's probably going to be some more, you know, mean tweets and harsh language. I would probably characterize it more correctly as straight talk, which I think there's an appreciation increasingly as, world leaders realize how dangerous things have gotten.
We have the final acts of Sir Keir Starmer as Prime Minister. Tomorrow, he will travel to the NATO summit in Ankara with a defence investment plan that is unfunded and which will soon become a major issue for his successor. Starmer may well find himself sidelined by officials, and he may also face the ire of President Donald Trump, who is demanding that his allies set out a path to spend 5% of GDP on defence. So what will the president make of our defence investment plan, which currently only leaves a vague path to 3% by 2030? Joining me now from America is Brent Sadler, Senior Research Fellow for Naval Warfare at the Heritage Foundation, which is an influential think tank that produced the famous Project 2025 manifesto, which serves as a blueprint for some of Trump's second term. Hi, Brent.
Hey, look, thanks for having me on your show.
Thank you for coming, and thanks for getting up early for it. So this is a big moment in Ankara coming up. Looking at it from a British perspective, there is some concern that President Trump will rebuke our Prime Minister Keir Starmer on this issue of defence spending. What are you expecting to hear?
Well, there's lots of issues that are significant that need to be addressed. Of course, there's an opportunity that appears to be opening on the ending the war in Ukraine, as well as what comes next in the conflict with Iran, notably British participation with other NATO allies and perhaps Asian allies like Japan in patrolling and securing shipping through the Straits of Hormuz. But the issue that's going to probably get President Trump's ire, because it's an easy metric of commitment to collective defense, is how much is the UK willing and able to spend in defense. And though it's meeting its 2% GDP goal from 2014 timeframe, it is still not on a path to achieve 3%, which is the new goal, and really a 5% now, if you include upwards of another 1.5% for infrastructure and associated investments. So there's not going to be satisfaction from the U.S. delegation if that is the outgoing prime minister's position. But again, eyes will be looking to the next prime minister and the posture that he takes with regards to defense spending in London.
And Brent, obviously, I always try to avoid the mistake of imagining that issues relating to Britain are top of mind for anyone in Washington. But Starmer is the outgoing prime minister. This will have been noticed by DC. To what extent, how do people feel about that? Do they feel that he's been a bit hopeless and weak? Do you think they'll sort of brush him aside and consign him to the dustbin of history?
Well, I would have to say the issue of Diego Garcia has soured the relationship considerably. And I don't think many memories here on that, to include President Trump as well, will forget, some of the vitriol and the under the table maneuvering that the outgoing prime minister was involved in. But that aside, there is a very special relationship that still exists between London and Washington, D.C., and that remains because our interests are so tightly connected and our histories so intermingled. But the premiership of Keir Starmer has been troubling at times, and so there'll probably be an optimism for what comes next.
Well, we like a bit of optimism here. But given that special relationship, do you think there is a particular focus on UK defence spending? Because it has always, traditionally, the UK has tended to lead on the European side on defence, if not being the top spender, at least in the top tier. Is there a particular concern that we appear to be slipping down that league table?
Absolutely. I mean, the Labour government has been a concern for some time, but it's certainly not a Spain or a Canada when it comes to laggards in defence spending within NATO.
Yeah, I don't think we want to compare ourselves to Canada.
No, far better than that. But Eastern Europe has been on the front line and certainly has living memory under the Russian yoke. So they've been leading for very real reasons, very realistic reasons to strengthen the defense for quite some time. And I think the UK and Italy need to step up, and they're on a path to do that. Of course, as already mentioned, Canada and Spain seem to be wanting to go in the other direction, resisting and not seeing the threat that's right there at their doorstep, to include China, quite frankly. But, there needs to be a more aggressive spending. London needs to resolve its 4.7, I guess, billion-pound deficit for defense spending and really figure out what its plan is going to be, given that the last defense minister resigned in June over this issue, that inadequate resourcing and speed of that resourcing is not going to get London the military that it needs in this very dangerous world. I
So,
think doing that's easy for Trump to see.
so you have the UK struggling to meet its commitments. As you point out, you have other countries such as Spain and Canada really barely on the pitch.
Yep.
Obviously, what kind of Trump do you think we're going to get at this summit? Because obviously this is a source of ongoing frustration, and he's been pretty vocal about this for years now. I mean, does he still believe in NATO? The rhetoric seems to shift about. Sometimes he sort of seems to lean towards, frankly, giving the whole thing up. Other times he does believe in it, but he really wants other allies to step in and do more. What kind of Donald Trump do you think we might see this week?
Yeah, I think politics here in Washington, D.C., I think blinkered or colored far too many minds in the capitals of European countries to what Trump's true intent was. And I never subscribed to the notion that Trump didn't believe in NATO. He had concerns, but as a good, good partner, you use explicit and straightforward language in very simple terms to explain what your concerns are, because it is so important that all the allies pool a fair share. And for far too long, our militaries have been allowed to atrophy. So I quite frankly saw a lot of that harsh language in his first term, and you still get from time now is actually a bit of tough love to try to get the alliance to where it needs to be. And quite frankly, it's been effective. And there's probably going to be some more, mean tweets and harsh language. I would probably characterize it more correctly as straight talk. Which I think there's an appreciation increasingly as, world leaders realize how dangerous things have gotten.
And finally, Brent, very quickly, in other field of geopolitics, FIFA has reversed the suspension of Folarin Balogun, the US star striker, following his red card. And it's been reported that this came after a call from Trump to review it. I mean, what's your take on this? Should the president really be weighing in on matters of sport? To us, it looks a lot like a rather undue interference.
Well, you're really pushing my expertise. I'm an American, so I'm more of a fan of football in the American sense, not soccer as we call it. But from my understanding, the call was to look at what I guess a lot of people were saying was an unjust decision by the referees.
It was a bad decision, but these things do happen.
Yeah, they said it was a bad decision. So, the Trump is an American, patriot and wants his team to win. So the asking for a reconsideration, of course, and that can be appealed. So let it play out in broad daylight rather than, under the table, which, that's not what's happening here.
That was a very diplomatic answer off your field of expertise. Thank you very much for joining us. That's Brent Sadler, the Senior Research Fellow for Naval Warfare at the Heritage Foundation in Washington, D.C.